How do you start an iconic movement? Mannerism would say it's all about refinement and richness of invention. Classicism would say it's all about form and craftsmanship. Impressionism might answer, it's all about capturing the magic of every single moment. While Surrealism would find all of this quite, well, surprising. After all, it's about creating the icon of a new movement. Welcome to Forwardism, the new BMW 7.
Good evening, everyone. It's absolutely wonderful to see you here. Warm welcome to Ignition. I'm Shoma Chaudhary. I'm the founder of Lucid Lines, a company that's absolutely passionate about the power of ideas and conversation. And this is a platform that reflects that. For those of you who are new, it's a platform, it's a pop-up platform that's committed to discovery, dialogue, and to debate. And as the word says, ignition, it's to ignite, expand, explore, shift the boundaries of what we take for granted. To do this, we are very, very excited and privileged to be partnering with Shiv Nadar Foundation, which was started by Shiv Nadar, the founder of HCL. And it's a foundation that's committed to the idea of transforming society through the power of education. And it's committed to this idea of curiosity, intellectual pursuits. Of course, many of you are familiar with its universities, institutes of eminence, its school right next door, the school sits opened in Chennai. But what's particularly amazing about Shiv Nadar Foundation is that it is as committed to creating equity with scholarships and with spending many, many, many crores on also providing education and scholarships to those that come from economically underprivileged backgrounds. And so they have an initiative called Shiksha and Vidyagan, through which they have made education available for more than 40,000 young people in India. So a big applause for them for that. And they really are wonderful partners because they're as committed to the spirit of inquiry. We also have BMW as partners. Again, great partners to be with because committed to creating conversations about the future, about examining our settled positions. So in the realm of luxury mobility, for the last 10 years, they've been focusing on electric mobility through the BMW i vertical. And the car on display today, when there's dinner outside, you'll see is the BMW iX, which is their first all-electric car. And their entire focus is on creating this kind of joy about forwardism and conscious luxury living in mobility. So great partners. DLF, of course, which is synonymous with urban development and with real estate for the last 70 years. Those in Gurgaon need no introduction to DLF. But of course, they've don't just believe in building structures, but communities. So we're really proud to have them backing this series of conversations. On a day when it's full of rains, I would love to say that they're synonymous with 21st century living, but it's also a reminder that nature still reigns supreme, no matter how large and big we get. So that's a good reminder. But of course, they are 21st century luxury living. We have Johnny Walker, which again needs absolutely no introduction. It's the lubricant to our curiosity here this evening, and we're very grateful to have them with us. We have Brand Avatar, our event partners, a wonderful team, Ravi, Preksha, Hema Chandran, who are here. And our own team at Lucid Lines, my husband and partner, Aditya Puri, a fantastic partner to have, so thank you. And the rest of the team as well. There's Navamita, there's Ritika, there's Dibyangi, and there's Valmik Kabir, and a whole host of others. So all of us here are your hosts today, and thank you very much for being here. The series of conversations today actually has a thread connecting them, which one didn't quite intend, and it's wonderful and serendipitous. But each session is really going to push the boundaries of what, one, what is visible, and two, that we take for granted and take as the norm. The first conversation is about something so familiar that we could almost be blinded by it. It's the clay pot. It's literally the most fundamental image of India, something we possibly see 1,000 times a day in our lives, and we don't think about it. But here is a musical instrument that is something that's very, very rare. It's a subversive tool. It's, of course, part of the Carnatic classical tradition, but it plays a role that is something that we are blind to when we're just listening to it as music. And to make that role visible, we have a fantastic speaker today who's also a player. She didn't want me to introduce her like that, but I can't resist it, which is that there are only, well, approximately 10 women players across the world that play the ghatam, but there are only two. There are only possibly two that have a public profile, and that is Sumana Chandrashekar and her guru, Sukanya Ramgopal. So we are very, very privileged to have Sumana Chandrashekar here today. She will evoke the mystery of this humble little pot, why it has a power that is beyond its shape and what we look at it for, and why she believes that it is literally the vessel of the primordial sound of the earth. So ladies and gentlemen, please welcome on stage Sumana Chandrashekar. Sumana, while you're settling down, I'm just going to speak to the audience, and I'm feeling very gauche because I have these sandals on that I'm not taking off. But so, before we delve into the mystery of this instrument, and it's, like I said, it's subversive power, which it takes a woman to unleash, I'm going to ask Sumana first to play the ghatam a little bit for us, so that we are drawn into the beauty and power of its sound, and then we'll unveil the rest of its story. So, Sumana, over to you.
Sure. Can we have the EP on, please? Thank you, Shoma, and thanks to everybody who's present here this evening, despite the rains. I think in India, to the Indian mind that is steeped in mystic philosophical thought, like Shoma already mentioned, the clay pot is such a ubiquitous instrument, and to the Indian mind, it's not very difficult to make connections between the body and the ghat. Mystic saints from across several centuries have always spoken about this, and I'd like to begin this evening with this lovely verse by none other than Kabir. Tak dhim dhim na tak dhim dhim धीम इस घट अंतर बाग बगीचे इसी में सिरजनहारा इस घट अंतर पारस मोती इसी में परखनहारा इस घट अंतर सात समुंदर इसी में 9 लख तारा इस घट अंतर अनहद गरजे इसी में उठत फुवारा कहत कबीर सुनो भाई साधो इसी में साईं हमारा कहत कबीर सुनो भाई साधो इसी में साईं हमारा इसी में साईं हमारा इसी में साईं हमारा किड़तक तरी किड़दुम किड़तक तरी किड़दुम किड़तक तरी किड़दुम ता ता किड़तक तरी किड़दुम ता किड़तक तरी किड़दुम ता किड़तक तरी किड़दुम ता ता दिम किड़तक तरी किड़दुम ता दिम किड़तक तरी किड़दुम ता ता दिम किड़तक तरी किड़दुम ता.
So that was merely a prelude, and it's going to build up more. But Sumana, I kept some of the best stuff to now start speaking of it. That the Ghatam was first spoken of by Valmiki in the Ramayana. And like we said, it's such a humble pot that we don't think of it.
Yeah.
But yet you came to it in your, you said, sorry, can we just turn down the...
Yes.
Should I ask the console to do it? So, you spoke of it, it's literally like the Kabir of the music world, because it's subversive.
Yeah.
And as I said, you're only one of possibly 10, but well-known 2 women that played.
Yeah.
It was seen as a domain of the male world.
Yeah.
Why is that? It's a clay plot, it's 2 hands beating it. Why was it not seen as something that women could do?
I mean, percussion in general, as we all know, you look at drums, you look at any other percussive instrument, is normally considered something that that men would be playing. It's very rare, and this is across the world, not just in India. Look at how many drummers do we know that are women across the world, right? Hardly. Very few of them. Or the frame drum traditions, or even in India, the many classical traditions that exist, there are very few women. I think the notion of, power, having power, often people have asked me, oh, it must be so difficult to play it, and your hands are going to pain, and this and that. So I think it's also our stereotypes about women, and what women should do and should not do, and what men can do and cannot do. So I think this is all pervasive.
So, on a day when Wimbledon's male finals is going on, and we've lost a lot of our audience to that, it's a good entry point to discuss about, how you as a woman player made this instrument your own. And before that, Sukanya, your guru,
Yes.
had waited 35 years before she got another woman to play it. And she was literally the first.
Yeah.
So when we're talking about an instrument that's been there from the Ramayana, is
Yeah.
the first mention.
Yeah.
We're talking at the very least 2,000-3,000 years of history when there's been no woman to play this.
Yeah.
Both of you were called, you said that you literally, your fingers started moving and you had to break into this instrument. So tell us what made you want to play this. Tell us about that experience of your fingers moving.
Yeah, so this was in 2009. And in India, especially with the classical arts, you have to start when you're 2 or 3. And then by the time you're 20 or 30, then thoda kuch kiya hai, that's the idea. And this was 2007. I was already working at that time. I had been trained as a Carnatic vocalist since I was 7. And I'd already started performing, but in 2008, I suddenly started waking up in the middle of the night feeling I was hearing sounds of this particular, it was very, very clearly for me the sound of a clay pot. And then that my fingers were moving to its rhythm and so on. And it was something very, for the first few months I thought, theek hai, it's something that generally happens, I must be hallucinating. But when it kept appearing and it stretched for several months, I shared it with my vocal guru then, and then also my other friends, and they all said, listen, there's something that your heart is saying. You should just explore it. I was very apprehensive about it because I didn't want to do something 2 weeks here and 1 month there and then say this is not for me. And then I said, okay, let me give it a try. And I'd go and watch Ghatam players in concerts because I wanted them to see where I was coming from. This was a very specific kind of, it was a churning within me and a call for something. And I'd go and watch Ghatam players, most of them men, of course. But when I saw my guru, Sukanya Ramgopal ma'am, and I saw how she was cradling this baby, this Ghatam in her lap, I said, that's it, I don't have to go further. But then I went into another few months of questioning because I didn't know if I could go and ask somebody as senior as her, will you take me as your student? And I don't know anything about percussion. So after, again, with a lot of trepidation, one day I called her and she said, okay, come. And the second day of my class, I saw in the middle of the class, she had tears in her eyes. And suddenly we stopped and she said, you know what? I waited for 35 years to get a female student. So I'm often reminded, of Rumi when he says, when the student is ready, the teacher appears. It was that kind of a moment for me, and it's almost seemed like we found each other and we were waiting for each other. I still have goosebumps when I think of this moment.
But it's so strange because when I was reading about Sukanya, that she too had that experience. She had a feel as though she was getting a call to play this. So it's almost like the earth was calling both of you to release it from male dominance. So I wanted you to share the story. In fact, Meenakshi Amma's on screen.
Yes.
That this is now the third element of the woman
Yeah.
in the making of this pot. So there are finally two players playing this on stage. Tell us the story about the making of this pot and the role of a woman in it.
Sure.
And also, what you were sharing with me earlier, that you feel it's not just why I mentioned the Wimbledon, you mentioned power and speed, which is seen as a male physical attribute. But the actual making of the pot is actually a woman's domain again. So share the story of Meenakshi Amma with us, please.
Yeah, so this question that what my guru said to me, that she had to wait so long, it kept bothering me. And one of the things I started asking myself is, why is it that no women came to her earlier? So it was really a bug in my head. So that was one major question. The other question was, I was also trying to figure out my own identity in this whole lineage of Ghatam players. Who am I as a woman in this tradition of Ghatam players, and whose sort of parentage can I claim in some way? And the third element was that I really wanted to understand the materiality of this instrument. Like, what is this thing that I'm playing on? Where does it come from? So all these questions put together, sometime in 2012, 13, I think, one December, I decided not to go to Chennai for the music season. I went straight to Manamadurai, where this Ghatam is made. And I requested the family if I could just stay with them and learn Ghatam making. And they were very gracious. They welcomed me into their home. And the main person there was Meenakshi Amma, who you just saw on the screen. Well, it was mostly her son, and up to that point, the world knew that Ramesh and his father Keshavan and his grandfather and great-grandfather, there's a whole men's line of Ghatam makers in the family, and they've been doing this for the last century or so. So I was in touch with Ramesh, and Ramesh, everybody knows, is the primary Ghatam maker and so on, but inside the workshop was this amazing woman sitting there, beating the pot day in and day out, day in and day out. And at that point, I didn't know Tamil. Even now, I don't. I can just barely function with it a little bit. But she wouldn't care. She didn't care about, that I was this person there in their house and so on. She would just go on doing her work. And slowly I built a connection with her. She built a connect with me, and we sort of became friends. And we started talking in a language that was beyond language, really. You connect at a different level, isn't it? So that's how we connected. And then one day she told me, all these years people think these journalists and researchers, they come and they write about my son and my husband and my father-in-law and all that. But actually, I'm the one who's making it. That gave me all my answers. Here was this woman who was making it, and here was my guru, who is the only woman, the first woman in India who's playing it. And they became like the pillars who I'm sort of their child. I feel like these are the two gurus whose energies, whose inspiration I draw upon. And she was sitting in that little workshop, unknown to the world, almost mocking at the whole world, saying, you guys think you're playing a male instrument, what rubbish. It was like that. It was fantastic.
But I wanted to share with the audience, a big detail actually that you missed, which is that, there's an ecology and the material around the pot, which Sumana will share with you. But Meenakshi Amma, the amazing thing about the pot is that anyone can make the pot, any potter. So why is it that only one village is the origin of all the pots that all the maestros play? And it's because Meenakshi Amma beats this pot 3,000 times for it to get that tensile quality that will withstand all the beating that happens, you know. So it's literally she that's beating the sound and the sound of the earth into the pot.
Yeah.
So that's the power of it.
So the pot is shaped by Ramesh or the men in the family who sit on the wheel. So women, my friend Sangita is here who's done research about the potters across the country. There are taboos about whether women can sit on the wheel or not and things like that. We won't go into that, but the pot is shaped on the wheel mostly by men, and this is across pottery traditions. But the beating of the pot, which is important because then it has to, all the moisture from the clay has to be removed, and only through beating. And there's a beautiful Kabir verse again which says the Guru is always beating, but the Guru is always keeping a hand inside, so that there's beating on the outside, but he or she is supporting you from the inside. So that's what Meenakshi Amma does. She puts the hand inside, and she's got a little tool with which is shaped like a, there's a flat surface with a stick, and she goes on beating. So it's about 3,000 times. It's painstaking. It's very, very hard to do that. It's laborious. So she does that until most of the moisture in the clay is taken out, and slowly, when the moisture is sort of going away, you hear the sound slowly emerging. It's almost like she's breathing life into that pot. I've got a video where this entire process, that one moment when suddenly you hear that ting coming out of the ghatam, it's like, the baby is born, you know, that kind of a feeling.
Yeah, that's beautiful, you know.
Yeah.
So, you know, we were just speaking about how because it's prowess and it's speed, so this story is so beautiful because the original physical prowess that beats sound into it is also physical prowess,
Yes.
which is the woman's hand.
Yeah.
But, you know, you've been saying that men thought that it's not something women can play because there's also something about the relationship with the body and the
Yes.
pot. Could you share that?
Yeah.
And once you've shared that story, now that Sukanya and you are women players playing the ghatam, how have you made the sound your own?
Yeah.
Can you demonstrate for us something of how a
Sure.
man would have played it and how do you play it?
Yeah, I'll try that. Maybe there's some people here who've already seen older videos of the ghatam being played. And in a lot of older videos, including videos of Shakti, where my guru's guru, the legend Vikku Vinayak Ram ji, has played, you might have observed that he's often playing shirtless. And there's a reason. It's not for nothing that this was done. A lot of men, and mostly men, of course, in the past, would play this because this mouth of the ghatam, when it comes into contact with the body, is where the air, you can play with the air column inside this mouth. So that's where you create certain sounds. And then, you know, what happens then when you place the ghatam on a woman's body? Will a woman be able to bear her midriff? Is that acceptable? The other question is, will Indian women do it? Because I was sharing with Shoma earlier, there's a 1968 or so article in Tamil which says, can women play the ghatam? That's the headline of that article that came out. So there were all these questions, debates about, oh, can women play it? Can Indian women play it? But, you know, women outside the country, it's okay for them to bear their midriff, but not in. So there's all the politics of gender that comes into this. So how do women then play it? My guru, of course, she's figured out her own ways. There's a lovely article, and this is also the reason why we need to write women's histories. It's so important because histories are often written by men about men, and it's important for women to write their own histories to understand how the gender politics has played out, you know, in society. So when the ghatam then is placed on a woman's lap, and then, of course, now even men do play with shirts. I don't think there's anybody who sort of plays bare-chested. But when women do it, so my guru, when she started out and she wanted to try this out, she would slightly part her pallu and see that, you know, she played with the sound. And this is something that is documented by C.S. Lakshmi, who is one of our greatest literary figures. She writes in Tamil, and so she runs the Sparrow Archives in Mumbai, and she's collected a lot of these women's stories. And this is from an interview she did of my guru 30 years ago. And I have known of this only because Lakshmi documented it. You see, that's the reason I say it's important to write women's histories. So the sound, for instance, and it's not just about production of certain kinds of sounds. It's also, we were talking about the speed. We were talking about a certain kind of maybe even aggression. With percussion especially, even as connoisseurs, as artists also, we are constantly trapped in this framework of speed. The faster you can play and the more power you can use, the more aggression you can use. There's a masculine framework to percussion itself in general, and then of course with the ghatam and so on. So, so even with the sounds, what are the subtleties of sounds? What are the feminine sounds that you can coax out of an instrument? That's been one of the questions. So for instance, if you have a phrase like, something like that, and how do you explore a feminine side to that sound? And this has nothing to do with the body of the person, whether it's a male body playing it or a female body. That's not the point. But there's also a femininity in the playing itself, in the sound itself. So this kind of a feeling of that, I think would be, and so my ideal for, you know, when I think that this is where I want to reach, that ideal for me is when I can actually put a baby to sleep, playing the ghatam. That's my idea of perfection.
You know, Sumana, it was so starkly different, you know, the way you played that.
Yeah.
And because it's coming out of mud and clay and the earth, I don't know, at least for me, I don't know if it's the same for the audience, but it evoked also a relationship with nature and with earth. You know, one is of dominance and the other is of cajoling and of planting and nurturing and, you know, like making something grow. There was such a distinct difference in that. And you've been saying that even Kabir says that the primordial sound of the earth is trapped inside the ghatam. So how you relate to it is actually a wonderful metaphor for how we relate to the planet as well.
Yes.
So, you know, I'm going to treat the audience very quickly to, when I was writing her up and inviting all of you, it's again, it's kind of indicative of her state of mind and how they're trying to change the conversation around the ghatam, that she didn't want me to speak of her as a ghatam master, you know. She said, we don't want to master our instrument, we want to surrender to it, you know. So that's how much of difference there is in the vocabulary. But very quickly, Sumana, sadly because of the rain, we have kind of lost time.
Yeah.
But before we go into the actual playing, the other way that you've described the ghatam is almost like a literary character, you know. It's a subversive jester, shaking up social hierarchy, social meaning. Can you share with the audience, like, what is this literary journey of this instrument?
Sure. So if one looks at performance traditions across India, mostly traditional performances, you take a yakshagana, you take a kutu, you take any of these forms, you will always find a vidushaka character, or who's also playing the role of a sutradhar. And this vidushaka is he's the fool, or he's the wise fool. And when I say fool, it doesn't mean she or he lacks wisdom, but it is the quality of being not clever, and the quality of being guileless.
In Hindi, it would be shatir, I think, like not shatir.
Ha.
Like,
And
cunning.
guileless.
Yes.
Guileless and very simple and very straightforward. That's the Vidushaka character. And very interestingly, when you look at the history of the Ghatam, which is sadly very scantily documented, and what I've found is only through oral histories and with interviews that I've done of Vikuji and others. One of the things that was beautiful for me to realize is that the Ghatam players in the past would always be invited to, a very serious performance as comic characters. They would come, and in the middle of a serious performance, you do something, you toss up the ghatam in the air, you play it upside down, and you play it with your knuckles and your wrists and things. So it was almost like a jester. They would invite this person, play for a few minutes, and then go back to their serious performances. So the ghatam has been this Vidushak character in some ways. And if you look at all these Vidushak characters in our different performance traditions, we realize what a powerful character that is. This Vidushak is often, maybe he or she would come on stage and get off the stage, but there's somebody who are conscience keepers of society. There's people who understand everybody's mindset. They also are aware of hierarchies. They are also aware of the social fabric. And at the same time, they want to diffuse conflicts that might exist in this. So it's a sort of a very a harbinger of peace in some ways. And it's also a very conscious, aware person. And I like to imbue, and I like to think of my ghatam as being imbued by the spirit of this jester, or who's on the margins, but not quite, Yeah.
And so we'd love to make you draw out the language of the ghatam now, but I just wanted to share that, with Sukanya and Sumana playing, we were saying like this is an instrument of social subversion, because like she was saying, from being the lower caste, marginalized instrument of the great Carnatic classical tradition, it has now moved center stage because of the women, and of course because of, Viku's amazing maestro playing. It's become an instrument in itself. It has its own voice. But now with the women, where earlier mics would be shut off, they'd be double marginalized, they'd be sidelined.
It still continues, by the way, not would be.
Okay.
It happens even now.
Yes, but just by virtue of them having intruded themselves into the conversation, here we are, 500 people, celebrating a woman for having broken into this tradition and making it her own. So today, in honor of the Kabir of the music tradition, we'd love you to play Sumana, and play it as a man, play it as a woman, play it any way you want. Let's drop the gender and just your relationship with the instrument.
I think as a society, we function in binaries. And that's such a sad thing, because we lose out on all the in-between spaces that exist. I'd like to remember Vikuji's father, Harihara Sharma sir, when my guru went to him and asked, please, will you teach me to play? And actually his son, Vikuji, said, no, it's not for her, it's going to be very difficult for her. And then Vikuji went off to the US to teach at Berkeley University. Vikuji's father was such a forward-looking man. And he said, the instrument doesn't know whether it's a man or a woman playing it. So I'm going to teach this girl. And it was his vision that led to, finally my guru learning it. And by the time Vikuji came back from the US, my guru had already sort of been, she had already gained some amount of expertise in the playing. So yeah, the point is that the instrument doesn't know whether it's a man or a woman playing it. And why should it anyway?
We didn't have time to delve into that. One, it's a beautiful end to this man-woman conversation we are having, that finally it was a man also that broke with tradition and taught Sukanya ji. And also this calling, which Sukanya and Sumana both spoke of. Strangely, Zakir Hussain, once before, when we were doing this conversation, there's this tradition of the chilla with musicians, when they have to go away and be in conversation with themselves and live in isolation for several weeks. And he came back with a tal which he had not been taught. And his father said, how on earth do you know this tal? And he said, he described a figure that had come to him in his dreams and taught the tal to him. And his father said, there's no way you can know this because you've never met this person. But it was his father's guru, So it's strange, the calling of the instrument, and these are first-hand spiritual stories. So the mystery remains inside that. And I'd hand over to you to evoke it.
Yes, sure. And just a quick line about the calling. We spoke about this as well. Sometimes you often wonder, what is the thing? What is the calling? It's difficult, I think, for a cerebral, rational mind to say what a calling is. But it's a very inner experiential thing. And for me, what a calling is, you know, you're at a beach and suddenly there's this whole gentle wave that comes and washes over you. There's no way you can escape that. You just surrender to that wave. That's really that's how I would describe a calling. And you can't fight with the wave. You can't do anything. Now you're fully awash, and you just surrender. So that's a calling, and I'm very glad to have been called. I really think that it's not our individual dreams, and I don't believe in that. I'm very anti-Anthropocene that way. I really think that we are their instruments, and these fellows take us in the way that they want to go, and they pick people and say, hey, you do this work for me. So I think I'm her instrument, and I'm very grateful that she's called me to do whatever she wants me to do. So I'm here, and so both of us together now, we share this little piece of music. Hope you'll enjoy it. Yeah, Mike, can you please switch this on? धुम तांग धुम तांग धुम तांग धिम तांग धिम तांग धिम तांग धिम तांग ता सदंजित मुदंजित निकुंजित पतंजल जलंजलित मंजुकटकम पतंजलि दृगंजन मनंजन मचंचल पदं जनन भंजनकरम कदंब रुचिमंबर वसंभर ममंबुद कदंबक विडंबक गलम चिदंबुदिमणिं बुध हृदं भुजरविं पर चिदंबर नटं हृदि भज चिदंबर नटं हृदि भज चिदंबर नटं हृदि भज
Thank you very, very much, Sumana. That was breathtaking. Thank you. Thank you. Like she said, it's a liminal character, you know, it has so much going on that you don't see when you just look at the form in itself. Next up is a conversation, again, by two people who are, in my book, amongst the most creative, iconoclastic, eloquent, encyclopedic